Welcome back to the Beyond the Hyphen podcast. I'm Mark Lee. I'm your host. Today I'm joined by William He, the founder of Dream for America, a youth-led civic organization focused on turning young people from observers of democracy into active and intentional participants. Now, William himself started Dream for America at the ripe age of 16 years old. And please correct me if I'm wrong, William. In a short period of time, it's grown into a national platform, engaging hundreds of thousands of young people around the country in things like civic participation, organizing, leadership, all things that this podcast covers intentionally. So, William, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Great to be on.
I'll start with a topic that I think is super urgent. A lot of young people care deeply about democracy. And here at Beyond the Hyphen, we are a youth-driven platform to lift up fellow young people. Very few decide to build, however. And so, William, if you would give our audience a quick background on what Dream for America is and what convinced you that building something new was the right response rather than joining or reforming something that already existed.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, right, I started Dream for America when I was at the ripe age of 16 back in this is like ancient history now, summer of 2023, I think. So much has happened since then.
Right.
And I was watching the far right build these youth machines, right? There's Turning Point USA, PragerU, and the list goes on. And I kept asking myself, where is the unapologetically liberal, pro-democracy version of this on the left? And I didn't start Dream for America because I thought other organizations were failing. I started it because I thought there was a gap that no one was filling. And I thought that most other youth political groups were either overly ideological, overly transactional, overly reactive, or just focused on the wrong things. And I think a lot of people have focused their efforts around short-term mobilization instead of long-term movement and infrastructure building. And I wanted to build something that treated young people not just as foot soldiers every election cycle, but as the future stewards of democracy. And I think we were designed from the very beginning to invest in civic identity, in values, and in leadership. And it's not just about who can we mobilize to vote for this X person at this election. And at the time, I didn't feel like there was a national organization that spoke to those values or those goals. And I didn't think that there was anybody who really was focused on an emerging kind of political problem that we're facing, right? Because Dream for America solves three problems, I think. First is building the necessary infrastructure to challenge the right on their turf. Second, right, to make an affirmative case, right? These days, you have a lot of young people shifting back to the left, which I think is great, but I don't think that's because they believe in the affirmative vision of what we're offering, but I think it's more so angst and anger against what the incumbent administration have been doing. So we need to make an affirmative case. And the third thing I think is kind of the latest evolution in political discourse. I think, right, of course, there's the traditional left versus right division, but I think a new division is emerging. It is top versus down, like one of the people I look up to, James Tallarico, says, but it's also about liberal versus illiberal, right? Those who believe in democracy, in institutions, in pluralism, in the rule of law, and in reforming our nation and our country and our government to be better. And those who are against that, right? Those who traffic in conspiracies and anti-intellectualism and in bigotry and in hatred and in prejudice and in viral populism. So I think that's also an emerging battle. And so I think instead, for me at least, instead of trying to retrofit myself into someone else's structure, I thought I would build the one to match the moment that we're actually in. And I started off, actually, I think around the time that I started, I had just come back from serving as a U.S. Senate page, literally working on the Senate floor while trying to finish my high school homework at midnight. And that convinced me of two things: that democracy is very fragile, and that young people are not a sideshow, and we're already in the room where decisions get made. And so I started this right out of a weird mix of fear and responsibility. So I filed the paperwork, I got started. I didn't have any money, any connections, or really any resources of note, but we did have a group chat. we had a Canva subscription, we had some Google Docs, and we had an Instagram account. And since then, we have evolved into a national organization with, different nonprofit arms, volunteers in all 50 states, places stretching from New York to California, from Wyoming to Alabama. And we've hosted great events, big conferences. In fact, actually, just this summer, we did our first national conference called Democracy Fest, where we had I think it was about 1,000 young people. 60-something% were young men, and among the young men, 74% have never ever been involved in any political organization ever before in their life. And we
Wow.
are just drawing so many people from all across the country through social media, and that was kind of the initial channel that we all got started this on. We're about to hit, I think, 1 billion views on social media very soon, and we are about to cross, I think, 1 million combined followers across all of our platforms. And so I'm very excited for what's to come. A lot has changed, but what's changed the most is that it's not just my project anymore. I think it is becoming a platform for so many other young people uh, to use to tell their stories, to be impactful on campus, run their campaigns on campus, and build their community. I think that's been the
Mhm.
coolest thing to watch.
No, of course. I mean, Dream for America, I think is right on your website. You call it the Turning Point USA for the left, right? It's that coalition building opportunity for youth. You mentioned 60% of the young men, or 70% of the young men who joined Democracy Fest during the summer hadn't had any previous experience with any political lobbying advocacy organizations. And so I think that's pretty remarkable, what you've been able to do. William, my next question, sort of diving into you a little bit. What moment did Dream for America stop feeling like this, local initiative, Instagram account, group chat started by a 16-year-old and really, really start seeing it being an organization that felt like it had the potential to almost reach 1 billion views, to almost have 1 million subscribers on Instagram? What was that moment that you knew that was the potential that you had?
I'm not sure if there is any one defining moment. I always like to think of our work kind of on an exponential graph, or any really startup, really. Like, it starts off really, really slow, and then, there's not really like one thing that just kicks it off, but then you start going up the curve, and then once you hit peak velocity, you just shoot straight up. So I think we're on the turning the curve part of our evolution right now.
Okay.
So I don't know if there's any one moment, but I would say like the moment that I started feeling like this was getting somewhere, I think, is the moment where I started showing up in rooms where young people are not usually in, or, even people that look like me, or even young people that look who are, people who are young and also look like me are in. And I think, there's a great quote from President Obama where he basically says, you're going to find yourself in some of these rooms, right, with some very powerful people. Maybe they're wealthy, maybe they've got all these titles or positions. But then, you actually get in the room, you talk to them, you're there, and not to denigrate their accomplishments or their credit, but you realize there's
They're
nothing
not all
that
that, right?
they're not there's nothing that makes them special or godlike or more powerful than you do.
Mhm.
As he says, they just folk. And so I think the moment where I started actually feeling that way, I think, is the moment where I think I realized that this could actually be something powerful. Where and oftentimes, actually, most of my job and anything that I really go to professionally, I'm always often the youngest and occasionally the shortest person in the room. I'm this young, baby-faced kid with black hair in a room with a bunch of, you know, old white dudes who have white hair. Um, but I think that's a testament that you can really do anything if you put your mind to it, which is why I tell everybody that I know, get involved. Whether it's politics or it's business or something else, if you want to do it, go do it because you only have this one life and you have to do everything you can to make the most out of it, whether it is you're pursuing happiness or whether you're pursuing a career, or whether you just want to make a difference.
Mhm.
Go pursue that dream, go start that business, go get the degree, go start a family, go do whatever it is you need to do to make this life as meaningful and as important to you as possible. And as for politics, my advice for anybody that is, looking to get involved, like it does not really take a lot to get somewhere. All you need to, and you don't even need to like, I mean, don't start things for the sake of starting things. But if you see a need in your community to do, and you think there's things that need to be done to change things, go plan, go organize. You don't need money. You don't need connections. You don't need the powerful backing of a billionaire family. You don't need any of that. All you need is a phone, and that's everyone has one of those. All you need is the courage and conviction to do it, and all you need is a plan. You have those three things, you're set, and then you can take it from there.
Yeah. Yeah, being a youth organizer myself, obviously I do this podcast. There's been a lot of doubters, not to be dramatic, not to be,
I'm sure.
but there's been people who've been like, "Are you sure you want to do this at 16, at 15?" And I'm sure you yourself, William, you faced many challenges, whether that be your age, your experience, but you had that dream, right? So during the beginnings, how did you navigate that? Who did you reach out to? How did you expand from just being a one-man game? And how did you envision growth in numbers and partnerships, things like that?
Yeah. Well, I tell you, it's still a problem to this day. But I mean, one thing that I got taught as, and this is something I take to heart, not just as a young person, but also as an Asian American, as the son of immigrants. There's a saying, right, in the immigrant community, it's that you have to work twice as hard to have half of what they have. And so I take that to heart, and I think that still applies, to my identity as a young person and the work that I do. And it's still present occasionally, right, in meetings I do, or I'm in criticism that I get. And so I think youth-led work earns legitimacy the same way that any serious institution does, right? I don't think it's really all that different. Um, People are not that impressed with you, and they'll doubt you until the moment that they are impressed with you and they don't doubt you anymore. It's right. It's the saying that it's always impossible until it's actually done. Right? They're gonna hate. They're gonna doubt. They're gonna find every reason not to believe you, not to support you until you actually do the thing that everyone says can't be done. And you get there by being disciplined, by being transparent, and you are ruthlessly results driven. Um, you can change the plan as long as you don't change the goal, right? Keep your goals the same. You don't have to get there on the same track that you envision for yourself. Be flexible, alter what the plan is, but never change the mission and the goal. Age also doesn't excuse sloppiness, right? If anything, it actually demands higher standards, which is going back to the quote I just mentioned, right? Working twice as hard. Especially as a young age, right? Trying to make it in any field, especially in politics or, quality is going to be very important, right? You have an even bigger urgency to prove yourself, even though you shouldn't, right? Just on the merits of your own ideas and your accomplishments, you should be able to make it. But you have an even bigger urgency to prove yourself, and so you don't have any room uh, to be sloppy, to make mistakes, and and it's okay to make mistakes. Just adapt and change and do better. And so, for at least for Dream for America, right? We were intentional about building governance early, creating very real accountability structures, and we partnered with very experienced advisors who respected youth leadership without micromanaging or casting doubt upon it. Um, and one thing that was really helpful was just building a circle of advisors early on who could guide me through the process, give me kind of their 2 cents on what I was thinking, what I was doing, and
Mhm.
connecting me to the people who they thought would be further helpful. And I would apply that advice to really any career, right? There are so many people out there, and people don't really believe this, but it's true. So many people out there that if you just ask, they'll be there for you. Of course, there's going to be so many people who don't believe in you and who are not going to help you out, but there are so many people on the contrary who will. Take me, for example. If anyone reaches out to me and they ask for advice, I'm always happy to give it, right? And there's so many people like myself uh, who are willing to do that because people who were probably in your shoes, or to anyone who's listening who were in your shoes, who are thinking of doing the things that they did, they probably did it themselves, and now they have the experience to reflect upon it. So, and the other thing I would say is, right, scaling responsibly is also important, and it also means resisting the temptation to grow just for visibility's sake. We scale when there's capacity, we scale when there's a need to scale, and we scale when there's an alignment with our values and long-term sustainability. And that's why we focus on training and chapters and culture and not just raw numbers, right? We want to cultivate growth that outpaces um, or cultivate growth that doesn't outpace sustainability. Because growth that outpaces purpose eventually collapses. And we don't want to build a house of cards and do this great thing just for it to all crumble down. We want to build a really rock solid, stone coliseum that stands for decades to come.
Stone Coliseum. Yeah. Yeah, no, there's a fine line between empowering young people, right? And turning youth civic engagement into action without a long-term vision for visibility only, like you said. Looking at this past summer, Democracy Fest 2025, I personally watched, certain speeches given by some electeds that you invited. How do you sort of work out, reaching out to them? Walk me through that whole experience of being there on that virtual space with those thousand, some kids and all these elected officials from, US senators all the way to you, like you said, your mentor or someone you admire, James Talarico, now running for Senate, and then all the way to Vice President Kamala Harris. How did that all happen for you?
Well, yeah, I think that part of that, right, is that little growth curve that I was talking about. I think it is being the right time in the right moment and us being at the place where we were at that time, where I think people were starting to really start to finally latch on to what we were pitching and selling. And I'd also credit back to what I said earlier, right, is building a good team and a team of trusted advisors. I think um, I've been honored and privileged and very lucky to have and be surrounded by so many um, really, truly, honestly impressive young people and also really impressive and amazing adults as well, who've been so kind and so generous with their support and their wisdom and their guidance. And so it's with the help of it, it really takes a village. So with the entire team, or whether it's young or old, I think they were, and combined with the momentum that we had, I think once you kind of just had even one or two or three people sign on, right? I think then you start getting a flood of people who are like, oh, okay, there's a new party in town. Maybe we should latch on to this. And so I think, really honestly, I think people just want to be part of something that is
Mhm.
important. And I think um, when you have something that people want to be a part of, people are just going to want to be a part of, which is why I urge people, right, who want to be involved in politics, right? Know why it is you want to be a part of something, why it is you're doing something, and then have a very clear idea of what it is you're going to do. Because if you actually believe in what you're doing, then other people will too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's always that discussion about maintaining responsibility throughout the process, and I think it's from personal experience too. It gets hard, right? Not to decide whether I want to be responsible or not, or whether I want to take the action that everyone knows is morally correct, but I don't know what's the right step to take, right, next to grow, to expand, to pass this message along. And this is sort of just on a general basis for those young people listening that want to build something in something that they're passionate about, right? Whether that's politics, whether that's in business, or I have a friend who wants to get to geopolitics, like going into the international sphere, right? He was bored of the US, and to be fair, that's not entirely on him. But there's also this, diving in a little bit, William. There's this difference when it comes to young people with an agenda, with a political agenda participating. And then also when you have those young people who don't yet have a political identity. They don't know if they're a Democrat or Republican or a libertarian, right? I'm curious, William, how do you decide the pillars of Dream for America? Where's that sort of percentage of the pie where you want to educate these young people civically? And then there's that part where you also want to forward the agenda of the left. Like, how do you draw that line there?
Are you asking like how did I come upon or why it is that I believe in what I believe in?
or I would say is the goal of Dream for America mostly to forward the agenda of the left, or do you see educating our youth just in general of civics as the driver issue, or is fighting against the right, the far right, the main driver of your organization?
Yeah. Uh, well, I mean, I think it's both. In my opinion, the future of politics, I think, is fought on the battlefield of who gets to shape our culture. And I think young people these days, and there's a reason why young people aren't tethered to political parties these days, because I think young people, writ large, left or right, are in search of truth, of courage, of authenticity. And our mission is, I think, about focused on leading with our values, centered on a love for freedom and dignity and democracy and the promise of what this country could be, um, and about challenging the infrastructure of what the right has built. And our goal is also to educate and inspire current and future generations of young Americans on what does it mean to be liberal and offer a better version for the future of this country than what conservatives have. And uh, I think our strategy is about building a pro-democracy movement that can compete with the right. It is not just about, because what Turning Point is, or any number of right-wing organizations, it's not just a campus club. What they have built is a vast youth media and organizing ecosystem. And we're focused on competing and educating and inspiring where opinions are actually formed, whether that's in social media feeds or in friend groups, in live events, being online, being on the ground, and everywhere in between. And people actually don't really fully understand how scary and focused that the right has been in trying to indoctrinate and influence young people. They have spent $1.6 billion over the last 5 years in trying to invest in efforts like this. And just this past weekend, Turning Point hosted a conference with, I think, 30 or 40,000 students from across the country, the largest event they've ever had. They've raised hundreds of millions of dollars since Charlie Kirk has unfortunately been assassinated. And they have had over, I think, 140,000 new requests to start chapters all across the country. Um, and in fact, they're starting chapters right here in my backyard. There's, chapters popping up at the high school I went to that has grown to, I think, over like 50 members already in a week.
Mhm.
And I don't live in the most conservative area ever. So I think that's what, at the end of the day, it's all about, right? It is building the infrastructure and then also inspiring and educating our generation and future generations about our vision for the country and making sure that people understand the stakes and so that they are ready and prepared to be the leaders that I know they can and will be when the baton is inevitably handed to them down the line.
You may have mentioned this earlier, William. And forgive me for picking your brain here, but
Yeah.
if someone your age, someone younger, came to you wanting to start a youth organization, with the hopes of becoming as influential and shared and admired uh, as Dream for America, what's that first thing you tell them not to do? What to refrain from?
Yeah. Well, my first piece of advice would be it actually wouldn't even be a Socratic method here. I'll ask them, uh, why are you doing this? What's your end goal? Why are you doing this? And what need are you filling? Right? Don't just start things for the sake of starting things, like I said, and don't just do things for the sake of trying to be visible. Because there's so many people out there who are trying to do that. Um, and A is just a waste of your time, it's a waste of other people's time, and it's a waste of resources. Uh, right? Because I know I'm sure there's, I'm not sure that that's not everybody, but right, there's always going to be a certain number of people, right, who will, for example, if you're in high school, right, do things for your college apps, or people who do things in college for the sake of clout or to make themselves feel better, or any number of reasons, right? If you have a genuine reason of, okay, I see something wrong in my community or in the country, I want to do something about it. I have some semblance of a thought out plan of how I'm going to do it. Then I would tell you, go do that thing. Otherwise, there's way more other avenues to get involved other than just starting an organization.
Mhm.
Um, that's probably my first piece of advice, right? Like, know why it is that you truly are doing this. Ask yourself, what impact do you think you can make Is that realistic that you can do so? And if so, what plan am I going to have to get myself there? And if you can answer all three of those questions successfully, then I think green light's a go, and you should go forward with this. So that's probably my first piece of advice.
Yeah. Before this chat, you mentioned you're of API descent. You're the kid of immigrants, Chinese immigrants. We
Yeah.
need to see more Asian Americans in elected office.
Yeah.
And whether you like it or not, whether it's PC or not, right? People respond to seeing people that look like them in office. And I think that's an important part of representation. It's not something we can hide from or we should hide from. And so from my standpoint, I do a lot of work in the community where I first start with educating or trying to educate youth about why it's important, why this whole civics legislation government thing is important, and then why you should personally get involved into this. We see, the vast majority of Asian Americans pursuing STEM tracks. We see their parents, almost indoctrinating them with, okay, be a doctor, be a computer analyst, get into AI, and by all means, AI is super hot right now. But what's your message to the young Asian Americans out there who have an interest in politics but don't see themselves in a space that's dominated by people like old white men, people that were here for generations in the United States? What's your message to encourage these kids?
Yeah. Well, first, I can feel pretty, relatable and strongly on the whole STEM and AI and all that track. I mean, I think for a lot of, and whether it's Asian immigrants or others, I think education has always been a very cornerstone foundation of immigrant communities, right? I think so many immigrant parents will come into this country and think that immigration is really the first step to any of their kids being successful. And I think that's been very well ingrained in so many of them. That's why they all want us to be doctors and lawyers and STEM majors and the list goes on. And I think that thinking is not entirely wrong, right? I mean, because I think those jobs often yield higher incomes, and the pathway to get to those jobs is to be educated. Right? Something that my mom always tells me is right. The only way that she doesn't have anything to give me, right? There's not much money that she can give me. There's not much assets or whatever else that she doesn't have roots in this country, right? But what she can give me is the opportunity to go to the best schools that I can, prepare me to go to those schools, um, and set me off to be successful there. Everything else is in my own hands. Um, so I think that's you know, my first advice, right? Like go to school, do good, right? Your parents are right on that part, right? Go get those A's. I occasionally did not get the A pluses, unfortunately, but go get the A's, go lock in.
Yeah.
That's important, right? Whatever field you enter, be disgustingly educated, that no one can question your credentials, no one can question that you don't belong, and your knowledge and your background and your resume and your credentials are unimpeachable. The second thing I would say to any Asian American who is interested in pursuing politics or something that is not STEM related, absolutely go for it. Firstly, just on a pragmatic level, like if every single young Asian kid is going to be doing STEM, there's no more STEM jobs for you, all right? There's only a certain amount of STEM jobs that you
Right.
can have. So if all of us are going to be doing AI or comp sci or whatever, by sheer nature, some of us will not get those jobs. Then you have to think about, all right, what about the white people or the black people or the Hispanics or like literally every other group of people who are all thinking the same way? Okay, if I want to make money, I gotta go do this. Don't think that way. Free yourself from that thing, right? Obviously, money is important, right? You need money to survive, but there's so many other ways to make money than just purely going into finance or a STEM field, right? There's so many ways to make money in this life. So I would encourage you to just do what you love. If politics or if humanities or if writing or poetry, whatever those things, if that is what calls your name, you should do them. Because as much as important as STEM is, what makes the world go around, what makes life worth living is politics and is reading and writing and poetry and beauty and love and the arts, right? I don't know if you've seen Dead Poets Society. I think I'm like starting to vaguely quote that right now. The professor in there, he says, right, math, science, medicine, engineering, these are all noble pursuits, but love, beauty, writing, poetry, those are what makes life beautiful and worth living. Um, and so I encourage any young Asian American, or really just any young person in general, if you are interested in getting involved in politics, or if you want to pursue a life in law, or something that's not in medicine, or not in STEM, or not in, math or engineering or whatever else, I would absolutely tell you to go do it because you you should do what makes you feel fulfilled, right? The only way to do great work is to love what you do. And the only way that you love what you do is to choose something that
Hmm.
really that you feel inspired by. So that would be my advice, right? Like I think, take take it under advisement of what your parents and your family and what, your brothers and sisters and what your community says, but take that under advisement, think about it. But if that's something that really calls you and draws you, I absolutely go for it.
Yeah. William, I have just a few more questions for you, but this one's slightly more personal
Yeah,
for
go
me.
for
Um, I have had some really, really remarkable educators and teachers who are also mentors and great friends at the same time. And I'm sure, they know who they are. Thank you for all that you do. For you, William, you you obviously mention how you couldn't have done this alone, right? And I'm not saying, you've reached your potential, you have, all the way means to go, but who has been your biggest mentors beside your parents, and how do you see that relationship between mentee and mentor, and how does that drive your work?
That's a great question. Hmm.
And feel free to, take a second.
Some of my biggest mentors have been teachers and educators, right? Because people often ask me, okay, how did you, get so deep into politics or so, what sparked your interest? I would not nearly be where I am today without similar probably to you, without the mentorship and education and advice that I've gotten from so many of my teachers. I really think like public school teachers are some of I mean, they have a special place in heaven for them. They're just such incredible people. Or actually just teachers in general, because I've had the privilege to go to both private and public school throughout, uh, middle and high school. Of course, I go to a public school now. I had a stint in private school, and then I graduated public high school, and then now I'm in a public university. And
Yeah.
honestly, I actually like it better at public school. It's just, or UT. I mean, we have football, so life is great.
Football.
Um, but to answer your question, I think I would say, yeah, some of my biggest and best mentors have been my teachers. I think my first time ever being introduced to politics was actually reading an article in Time for Kids magazine about the Iowa caucuses. And I had this, and it's actually part of the reason why I am nearly as good at writing and reading and speaking as I am today is because of this remarkable woman who was a kind of a reading, writing English tutor, not like for the language, but for for class, right, to help out with, my writing and make sure I'm doing extra reading, right, that kind of thing. Um, and I think it was over third or fourth grade, she introduced me to the Iowa caucuses for the first time. I found myself so intrigued by the way that people and politics, how that interacts together. Because I mean, at this point, I think that there is no other subject more important than politics. Everything around us revolves around politics, from the way our roads are built to, how this uh, how Zoom and how all of this is regulated to whether we get water, to how much taxes we pay. It's all politics. Every element of human history is dictated by people standing in a room of other people talking about how to deal with a situation or more people. Um, I think there's no subject more important than that. So, this is a long-winded way of saying that I think teachers are some of the most incredible, amazing people ever, and I think they've been some of my best mentors. And how I straddle the relationship,
Yeah.
I mean, really, mentorship is all about finding uh, someone who sees your potential and really believes in you, and almost over time they become this very wise friend, um, who you can just talk to them about anything that's going on. I think that's what makes some of the best mentors. And I would encourage everyone to find at least one mentor in their life, right? And mentor is not just someone, you like LinkedIn farm and DM them on LinkedIn, but and they can be, but a mentor is somebody usually, somebody you come in contact with, somebody, you already know. And over time, you develop a relationship, right? And they actually truly, genuinely get to know you, right? What is your story? What makes you tick? What are your dreams and your goals and your ambitions? And they really understand you and what you're all about. And they're not like sitting there, you know, checking their watch and answering, how do I get to this job or how do I do this? They're there because they actually care about you and they want to see you succeed and they are willing to sit there for hours talking to you, interacting, just being in conversation and in community with you. And they just want to hear how you're doing.
Yeah.
Want to see you do even better. So I think that's what the best mentors are. And I would consider, um, and of course, I still, some of my mentors, I still address them by, Miss or Mr. or Mrs. But I think the commonality between all of them is that on a deep level, they all deeply, genuinely know who I am, and I have built a really strong bond with them over the years, and they really want to see me succeed, and I really want to see them thrive as well. And I think that's probably how I would straddle my relationships, at least.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. No, I def they're rare to come by. And I think that personally, I moved right after 2 years at a public middle school. I moved to another middle school within the same region, right? And I thought, why did we do this, mom, dad? Why did we do this, right? But now thinking about it, I'm so grateful that I'm here where I am. And she knows who she is, my teacher. She has done so much for me. I'm super grateful. I just feel like she understands what I want, and sometimes, I'm not cooperative or I'm not getting what she's saying, and she's still super patient. And I just, want to echo your thoughts on that. How mentors, educators are absolutely remarkable in being this place where young people can grow. And I have two more questions for you, William.
Yeah.
Getting, zooming back out into the blue wave that's going on here in this country. We saw, young political leaders like Zoran, like, Chuck Barty over there in San Francisco, and James Talarico, of course. What stands out isn't it's not just their age, but the choices that they make time and time again, how they speak, right? What risks they're willing to take, what values they are not willing to sacrifice, and the coalitions that they build with others. What do you think young people like you and I should really take away from their leadership, and how do we build upon their work and their legacies?
Yeah, great question. Well, I guess I'll have two answers to that. On a political level, right? I think that what young people want from the Democratic Party or just their leaders in general is authenticity and courage. And I don't think we need perfection. We just need conviction, and we need leaders who talk about freedom in our terms, right? The freedom to learn, to vote, to love, to live without fear. And so over the next couple of years, I think We have a great opportunity to reclaim the language of patriotism, um, to remind Americans that progress and pride are not opposites, that we can love our country and still fight to make it better. We have a great opportunity to talk about the fundamental issues of this country. I think too often, right, people are so stuck in the daily partisan BS of the day, of who's up, who's down, who, left and right, and, what's going on in Washington today, who said this and who said that. I think at the end of the day, people really just care about how are they and themselves and their family doing.
Hmm.
Can they get their kids to school on time? Are their roads paved? Are they living in a safe community? Do they have clean water and good food to eat? Can they afford their gas and their groceries and their car payments? Can they afford a house?
Yeah.
And I think one thing that also stands out, I think, is honestly, I don't think people really care that much about how old someone is, because I'm perfectly fine having an old person be in office or be in any position of leadership as long as they have the vigor and the energy and the values to pair it alongside with. Because you can be 100 years old and your heart's still beating great and you're in great health and you're still fighting for the right things, then I'm happy to keep you there. Because on the contrary, you could be a 25-year-old and you could be absolutely atrocious on every single issue and you could, be horrible at your job, and I wouldn't want you in office. Um, so I would say, like, the other thing is I think the biggest lesson that people can take from this current wave is that values and pragmatism are not opposites. The most effective leaders today are those who pair moral clarity with institutional competence, that they don't confuse purity with effectiveness, and they don't confuse compromise with cowardice. Too often today in our politics, people are stuck in their silos, constantly trying to out moralize and out vocalize each other. Twitter is a cesspool if you've ever been on it.
Mm.
Uh, and I think especially young people, should take away that leadership is less about branding yourself as right, but more about earning trust over time. The leaders who are resonating now, they are all serious and prepared, and they are grounded and focused on public service, not spectacle, not social media fame. Um, and I think this moment shows that politics is very cyclical. Windows will open and close, and if young people want to shape the next era, they have to build the institutions and not just moments. And that's how values endure. I also see so many people who, will just hop in and like, okay, yeah, I'm running for Congress now, or I'm running for this big thing now. Do the work of actually being a part of your community, building the relationships, figuring out what actually matters, what do people want, and then jump into it, right? Because I think some of these people are, I don't want to cast doubt on them, but I feel like some people are more focused on the social media clicks than others.
Hmm.
Uh, so anyways, I don't know if this is drifting away from your question or not, but that's kind of generally my answer, and I think. Um, Right, at least I'm very optimistic about what is to come.
Yeah.
There's the future is bright.
And being where I am, over here on the East Coast and in Maryland, I see there's concrete issues that we need to solve, right? There's concrete, real life lived experiences that young people are facing. They're facing challenges. There's those people who enter politics for the sake of entering politics, and then there's those people who branch off into politics with the foundation of like lived experience. And in the words of my own governor, Westmore, when you serve, right, when you serve with the people you're trying to help in mind, your altruism remains altruistic. And if you sort of forget about and forget to include the people that you're trying to help, and very often our young people are forgotten. then your altruism or altruistic desires become paternalism, right? You start forgetting about them. You start belittling them. And that's something also that my mentor, my great teacher, she's told me repeatedly, time and time again, that youth cannot keep being forgotten. And I think that's why a lot of political candidates, don't make it far, because in the role that we see youth increasing and filling, some people are not recognizing the importance of young leaders and young advocates. And so thank you for your response. Last question, and it has absolutely nothing to do with democracy, unless you want it to. Outside of the work that you do in politics and civics, what's one thing that you what's that completely rational hill that you'll die on? Or, what's that completely hot take that you will absolutely not budge on until the end of time?
Ooh, hmm.
Personally, I hate mushrooms, right? No one can convince me that mushrooms taste good. It doesn't have to be related to politics or.
Yeah. I'll give you two. First, vanilla ice cream is the best flavor of ice cream there is. It is plain, it is simple, everyone can get behind it. It's not it's not the most flashy. It'll get the job done. And you can substitute it for pretty much any other flavor, and even though it might not be your first choice, you'll be fine with it.
Hmm.
And there's actually, I think a lot of people actually like vanilla ice cream, myself included. So I think vanilla ice cream is the best flavor of ice cream. The other hill I'll die on is that napping after like 3 p.m. is a trap set by the devil. You will wake up in a sweat, frenzied. It's all blurry, and it's going to be 8 p.m. And you're like, oh my God, what happened? And it's dark outside. Your entire sleep schedule's ruined. Everyone's downstairs eating, or maybe they're all gone because you're asleep. So
Yeah.
I think do not nap after 3 p.m. I've been victim occasionally, but do not nap after 3 p.m. I've woken up, was like, okay, 30-minute nap, 3 p.m. It's gonna be fine. Holy crap! It is 10 p.m. What happened? Um, so I'll go with that. Oh, and one last opinion.
Third hill.
Third hill. I do not believe in drinking tea or coffee. If you can raw dog life without any energy drink or other substances, continue to be that way. I do not drink tea. I don't drink coffee. I don't drink energy drinks. The most I'll drink is Sprite, and that doesn't even have caffeine in it. So I just usually drink water or apple juice or lemonade or something like that, and I can get by just fine.
Yeah.
So if you do not need to drink coffee or tea or whatever else, or I'll occasionally be performative. I have a strawberry matcha or whatever, but
Mhm.
if you can get by without any of those, stick by it. Your body will thank you in the long run. And of course, this should be more common sense, but don't smoke.
Yeah.
Try not to drink alcohol, or if you do, drink it in very moderation. Some wine is good for you occasionally if you're
Yeah.
21 plus.
Yeah.
Uh, those are my three hills.
That's perfect. And I think that tells us everything we need to know about William He. Um, William, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I really appreciate the work you're doing, and I appreciate you, taking this conversation seriously. So thank you.
Of course, thanks for having me on, Mark.